Since he first broke out in the early 80s, Tom Hanks has given us one fantastic performance after another, showing his ability at comedy and for gut-wrenching dramatic roles too. Looking over his career, it was difficult limiting this list to 10 performances, but I gave it a game try. But let's just say if I included everything he's been great in, this video would be a lot longer. Anyway, here are the performances I did choose to include. Sam Baldwin in Sleepless in Seattle. Of the romantic comedies Tom Hanks made with Meg Ryan, this is my personal favorite, and this is despite them sharing very little screen time together. Hanks brings a lot of charm to the role, especially in his interactions with his son, but it also showcases Sam's continued grief after losing his wife. So much of the film hinges on an early scene where Sam is talking about missing his wife on the radio, as Hanks has to make those feelings sound genuine, thus getting the ball rolling, and he absolutely does. There are several funny scenes with Hanks finding the humor out of the strange situation he's in, along with showing his concerns about his son. He has the right reactions to everything that happens in the story, but most of all, Hanks brings the needed sincerity to Sam. Once we get to the famous scene at the Empire State Building, we have become emotionally attached to these characters, and Hanks deserves a lot of credit for that. Kyle Hanratty in Catch Me If You Can. This FBI agent was only loosely based on the real person who searched for and arrested Frank Abagnale Jr., which gave Tom Hanks a lot of freedom of how to interpret the character. He successfully depicts Carl's determination to catch him and how seriously he takes the job, but there are also wonderfully funny moments, with highlight coming from a knock-knock joke. The few scenes he shares with Frank are wonderfully performed by both Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio, including one where he himself is fooled. What's important is that while Carl is an obstacle for Frank, he is not depicted as a villain. He's just trying to catch someone who he feels is doing something deceitful and illegal, and throughout all is a curiosity of how he managed to pull these schemes off. Catch Me If You Can is a movie full of fantastic little character moments, and Carl gets a good amount of them, including his telephone calls with Frank. Hanks knew how to depict his character's hard-nosed attitude when looking into this case, and it made for a memorable chase. Andrew Becket in Philadelphia. Tom Hanks won his first Oscar for this role, and it's easy to see why, as he brought the needed dramatic weight to his role as a lawyer who becomes diagnosed with AIDS. Hanks shows his progression as his state weakens, but his focus on winning this lawsuit against his former employers remains intact. Hanks depicts the various emotional states of the character and brings the needed dimension to Andrew beyond just an element of sympathy. The slowly growing friendship with Denzel Washington is well portrayed, along with showing why he has so many friends supporting him in this battle. This was not his first dramatic role, but it was the one that proved to everyone that he could tackle some deeper and darker material and go for something very different from his usual characters. Josh Baskin in Big. Tom Hanks had the tricky task of playing a 12-year-old suddenly turned into an adult overnight, and he made it completely believable. He could have easily gone overboard with it, but he finds the nuances in showing his excitement, again to do things he could not as a child, along with his fear of being thrust into this different world. The relationships he develops with the other characters he meets, along with the one with his best friend, provide further growth for Josh and how he deals with working at this toy company. What Big does so well is capture that feeling we all had when we were younger of wondering what our adult lives would be like, and once we finally reach it, occasionally missing the carefree times of being a child. Hanks nailed that through his performance, along with other great touches. The famous giant piano scene has become iconic, partly because of the joy Hanks brings to that, and the comedic scenes and little exchanges provide humor too. This is a delightful performance, but one that Hanks brings the necessary dimension to, even with this fantastical premise. Jimmy Dugan in A League of Their Own. In hilarious performance, this character allowed Tom Hanks to play this drunken baseball manager to great effect. From the moment he stumbles in, we understand so much about Jimmy's whole deal and his frustrations at coaching this women's team. Hanks gets that this is not a nice person, but also manages to show his change in eventually respecting the players. He plays the drunken scenes with the right comedic approach, allowing that act to never get old, and his reactions to the team provide plenty of great comic moments. The classic line, "There's no crying in baseball," is such a great summation of his character, his confusion, and sexism. And even as he grows, Hanks keeps a lot of Jimmy's grumpy personality throughout. A League of Their Own is a charming comedy, largely thanks to Penny Marshall's direction and the performances from the lead actresses, but Hanks is key to its success too. Forrest Gump in, Forrest Gump. His second Oscar-winning role, Tom Hanks made Forrest into a likable personality as he makes his way through history. From the moment he starts to tell his story, he has our attention, and Hanks brings a lot of likability and charm to the role as he attempts to navigate his life. Forrest is not a character who necessarily changes himself, instead mostly reacting to the world around him, the friends he makes along the way, including his love interest Jenny. And Hanks plays that aspect of him exceptionally well, showing both the joy he has for those dear to him and also the sadness that sets in on occasion. This is exactly the kind of character that Hanks could have overdone, and he absolutely doesn't. He finds the right line readings for the comedic moments, including his meetings with famous historical figures and the more dramatic scenes, not losing sight of Forrest's personality. The film itself has been accused of being over-sentimental, and yes, it kind of is, but Hanks struck that needed balance with this performance that allows us to become invested in his story. Captain John Miller in Saving Private Ryan. I talked about this movie before and why it's so brilliant in a recent video, but one of the strengths of this film is Tom Hanks. He does an exceptional job of playing this captain who just wants this war to end, but recognizes he has a duty to continue and to fulfill this mission to find Private Ryan. His command of these soldiers is well portrayed by Hanks, and there are a lot of wonderful subtle touches in his performance, including the way he hints at Miller's pre-war profession well before it's revealed to us. Hanks does an excellent job with the speeches given by Miller, whether to his unit or to Ryan. Most importantly, we understand why he receives this respect. It's not uncommon for Hanks' characters to shout at others, but what makes him such a good actor is he does not shout the same way in each role and makes it specific to whichever character he's playing. Saving Private Ryan is a grisly and bloody war film, and Hanks finds the right tone to portray someone thrust into that nightmare. Woody in Toy Story. An excellent choice to voice the lead character in the first computer animated feature, Tom Hanks brought so much life to Woody and captures the multiple personalities of this pull-string cowboy. We see why he commands respect in Andy's room and the way he leads the meetings, but Hanks also does well in depicting the jealous side that comes out when Buzz Lightyear arrives. The interplay between him and Buzz is very funny, as he grows frustrated at Buzz not knowing he's a toy. There's a reason many of us remember Woody's outburst at Buzz when he yells this at him. In an earlier version of the film, Woody was a lot more of a jerk, but the filmmakers thankfully toned that down, as did Hanks in his vocal performance. He's a flawed individual, but not too much that he ends up hateable. Hanks did a nice job of showing Woody's evolution in the sequels as he continues to wonder about his role as a toy and what's the best thing he can do for Andy, Bonnie, and any other child that might form an attachment to him. When I think of the best vocal performances in Pixar's productions, Tom Hanks is definitely up there for the first Toy Story in particular. Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks. With such a famous icon, Hanks needed to make sure to not just turn into an imitation and make him feel like a real person. He did an excellent job, and very quickly, I did not think of this as Tom Hanks in a costume and mustache. It would have been so easy to go for the Uncle Walt image that Disney cultivated on television and which his company still continues to maintain. However, Hanks instead portrays him as someone frustrated at the demands made by P.L. Travers and his occasional tendency to not always listen, just thinking about his own ideas. Disney's befuddlement at her is humorously portrayed as he tries his best to appease her, and there's a funny dynamic between them as he so desperately longs for the Mary Poppins film rights. Hanks does a great job in the quieter scenes too, like a moment with Richard Sherman and one he shares with Travers where he talks about his childhood. He probably saw a major responsibility portraying Walt Disney and doing it right, and he certainly delivered in showing his flaws, nuances, and genuine enthusiasm. Before I name my number one pick, I do want to bring up some honorable mentions that I seriously considered including, and those are Splash, Apollo 13, The Green Mile, Road to Perdition, The Ladykillers, The Terminal, Captain Phillips, Bridge of Spies, The Post, and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. As you can imagine, it was quite difficult picking just 10. But my number one favorite Tom Hanks performance is Chuck Noland in Castaway. For most of the runtime, we were watching Chuck alone on this island, and so Tom Hanks had to do a lot to keep the audience invested, and he absolutely delivers as he displays Chuck's multiple emotions as he finds himself stranded and attempts to survive and navigate the difficulties of this situation. Some of his scenes are even done entirely without dialogue, relying on his facial expressions to convey what he's thinking. The most remarkable feat is the friendship he forms with a volleyball named Wilson. As his only companion, you believe the connection there, and it gets surprisingly emotional at times. That's a credit to both Hanks and director Robert Zemeckis for pulling that off. Even when he's not on the island, he delivers exceptional work, like an early scene where he's talking about the importance of delivering FedEx packages on time, or the sequence with the airplane crash. It's a very physical performance and probably the most difficult of Hanks' career, but he manages to make us feel like we've taken this journey with him by the end. As you can see, Tom Hanks has built up an impressive library of performances showing his comedic and dramatic skills, but it's Castaway that I think is him at his strongest. Now let me know in the comments what your favorite Tom Hanks performances are, and I'll see you next time.